Full interview with Owen Laukkanen, author of The Wild. What's your name, your job, and your major?
So my name's Owen Laukkanen. I am an author and I work in animal rescue as well. But writing has been my full-time profession for about 10 years. I started in university in pre-veterinary science, so like animal welfare. Wanted to become a veterinarian, and then after a couple years, I really realized how much I disliked chemistry, and so I applied to kind of a prestigious creative writing program and thought if I get in, it'll mean that I'm meant to be a writer. And lo and behold, I got in, and so I got a fine arts degree in creative writing instead of the veterinary science degree that my parents were kind of hoping that I would get, and have been writing kind of ever since.
Let's start with an easier question. What's your favorite thing about your job?
Well, being an author, it's something that I would do even if I wasn't being paid for it. So to be able to make a living, doing something that I love very much, that's something that allows me to be creative, that allows me a lot of flexibility as far as, how I spend my time, allows me to, just essentially get paid to make up stories. I love that. I love that I'm my own boss. I love that I'm not, I can make my own hours. I'm not going to an office every day. I can basically say that anything is research and justify it. It's a tough job because you're never guaranteed any income from year to year, but it's also there's no kind of ceiling to what you can do either. So I'm someone who likes having a lot of just possibilities in my life, and writing has opened up a lot of doors for me that allowed me to live a life that other folks wouldn't.
Have you always known that this was a career you wanted to do since you were young? If so, tell me why. If not, tell me what major or minor events influenced you to choose this path.
Well, I honestly, I never thought I was creative enough to become a writer. Like when I was in school, I was really into math and physics and stuff like that. And I read a lot as a kid. My parents were always taking us to the library and always making sure we had books around. So I read a lot, and I think in my teens, I wanted to. I guess I just kind of became more creative and wanted to be able to kind of evoke the stuff that I was reading. I remember reading a book that really, a passage really spoke to me, and I thought, well, I wish that I could kind of evoke that, or kind of take myself to that place, the way that this author has done. And so, from in my late teens, I wanted to be a writer, but obviously it's not a job that comes with a guaranteed income. There's no kind of guarantees that you'll ever make it as an author. So my parents were very supportive of me creatively, but they did kind of recommend that I try something else to fall back on. And so I started going into veterinary medicine, and then I just realized that I was having too much fun taking literature classes and writing classes, and it was really what I wanted to do. And I thought, for me, writing has been kind of a long periods of self-doubt punctuated by these kind of moments of affirmation. And so every time I have one of those moments of affirmation, it's like in a video game where you kind of power up and think, oh, I am on the right path. And my parents have been supportive of that as well. From about my teenage years, it's what I wanted to do. It's what and I'm very kind of happy and grateful that it has worked out, that I've been able to do it.
Do you consider your job repetitive? What usually happens in your typical workday?
It is repetitive. I think that what kind of determines success in publishing and in writing is less about the kind of talent that you bring and more about your work ethic and your willingness to treat it like a job. I always kind of talk about it as, every book that I start writing, it's like when you're in a new relationship with someone and you have that honeymoon period where you're just in love with the person and you want to spend all your time with them, and you're kind of obsessed. And I'm like that for, a few months with my books. And then another idea will come along and, seem more exciting, and, your attention wanders. And if you kind of fall prey to that, then you never finish a book. You just always kind of jump to the next idea, and you find yourself with just a hard drive full of chapters that you were obsessed with, but you never get anything done. And I think the key to writing professionally for me has been treating it like a job. Waking up in the morning and writing to a specific goal every day, and then as you do that for a couple of months, lo and behold, you have a book, and that's a lot more. Even if it's a bad book, you have a finished first draft that you can then go back and tinker with, and so it's a repetitive lifestyle, but it's one that every day is different because you're always telling a different part of the story. So my normal work day is that I'll wake up, I'll go to the gym, I'll walk my dog, and as I walk my dog and go to the gym, kind of thinking about the day's work and how the story's going to unfold. And then in the afternoon, I'll write. I try to write about 5,000 words every day. So like a novel is typically between 75,000 to 100,000 words. My first drafts are a bit longer than that, and then I cut. But so, if I'm writing 5,000 words a day, in a couple months, I can have a first draft done, and then it's the editing process. But it is it's something that I try to work on Monday to Friday, and in the evenings I try to read and kind of make time to see what other people are writing and to draw inspiration from that. So,
in what ways does your job benefit society? Would you say that you're helping others?
I would like to think so. I think that it's funny because when I went to university and enrolled in the writing program, they really didn't want people to write kind of commercial genre fiction, so like mysteries or horror or science fiction or romance or fantasy. They wanted people to just write, literature. And I was in my early 20s, and I kind of wanted to write literature too. But there really isn't a market or a need, I think, for too many kind of, disaffected 20-something white men talking about how hard it is to be a 23-year-old white guy, upper middle class white guy. Like, I think I didn't have much to say of much merit, and someone kind of told me that if you write genre fiction, if you write like a mystery or science fiction or something, you can say things about society in a way that has meaning, but also is kind of camouflaged in an entertaining story. And so what I find really fun about my job and worthwhile about writing, because I write crime fiction, I write thrillers and mysteries by and large, and young adult fiction that are kind of thrillers, is that you can can comment on society and shine a light on societal injustice, while also kind of telling a fun and entertaining story that people are going to want to read. And so a lot of what I write is inspired by the kind of injustice that I see in the world, and is my way of trying to grapple with it as best I can. And I'd like to think that it brings awareness in the readers to things that they might not consider. And like I say, you kind of do it in a sneaky way because people pick up my books thinking that they're just going to have an entertaining, something to read on the flight across the country, and then you're able to kind of just ninja in some social commentary. So I do think it's worthwhile. I think the arts in general are essential to society, and essential as far as kind of, like I say, shining a spotlight on things that are all too easy to ignore in our day-to-day lives.
What do you think is the biggest misconception people have about your career?
Well, I can think of a few. I mean, I think if a few months ago someone Googled me and it came up on like a celebrity net worth thing, and it said my net worth was like, millions and millions of dollars, which is simply not true. And I remember when I signed my first book deal, I had people coming up to me asking me if I was, just insanely wealthy now. And I think, most authors will tell you that it's a hard way to make kind of a mediocre living by and large. I've been very lucky. I've supported myself writing for 10 years, but that's really not it's not the norm. And by and large, most writers do something else as well as write. We're not kind of having, living in mansions and driving Rolls Royces and just living the high life. It's a job. It can be a grind. It can be quite challenging. And I guess the other kind of misconception that makes it difficult is, so it's November right now, so it's National Novel Writing Month, and where everyone, a lot of people kind of sit down and decide they're going to write a novel in a month, and kind of immediately after that, in December, it's the worst time of the year to be a literary agent or a book editor, because all of these people who've written their November novel just send it off to agents without any sort of kind of revisions process or reading it over and editing it. And, the number of kind of people who just kind of bypass the really essential part of writing, which is the rewriting, is interesting to me and a misconception. Like, I think a lot of people believe that once you get your book done in the first draft, you're good and you can just send it off and it'll be published and you'll make millions of dollars. And really, like, the hardest part of my job is editing my books and revising them and paring them down and making them, changing them from this big, messy kind of thing that came out of my head into like a very focused story that other people are actually going to want to read. So, I would say that people underestimate how much work goes into editing books and how much needs to be done beyond just kind of writing the story or coming up with the idea for that matter. Like, another thing is people will come up to you and say, "Oh, you're a writer. I have this great idea." And I mean, we all have great ideas. So much of writing is finding a way to get that great idea out of your head onto the page. And that takes discipline, it takes work, it takes repetition. I think it's harder than people kind of believe.
Describe the publishing process. What does it take to become a published author? What sort of people do you see becoming an author?
Well, dedication. I think dedication is the big one. Dedication is what differentiates a lot of published authors from other people. I think I would say that for me, work ethic and kind of being too dumb to recognize how stacked the odds are. Like, I think any logical person would look at the publishing industry and think, well, there are easier ways to make a buck. And for me, I think as authors, as artists, as creative people, you walk this balance between just having like paralyzing self-doubt that makes you kind of believe that you'll never succeed, and also kind of this like blind belief in yourself that pushes you to keep going despite the fact that the odds are long. So I've been lucky enough to work with a number of kind of aspiring authors who, when I met them, they were working on their first drafts, or they were kind of very early on in the publishing process, and now they have books you could on the shelves that they've gone the whole journey. So I think it's a matter of just kind of perseverance, reading a lot, like constantly kind of seeking to to better your writing, learning how to edit yourself really critically. I had a university professor who was actually kind of a writing idol of mine before he was my prof, and I remember him just like tearing my stories to shreds. And kind of, I think he gave me a D, and I'd never had a D on anything in my life. And I've kind of learned to look at my work the way that he did. I got an A in the class at the end, but it was a really good lesson to kind of look at your own work very harshly. And they say kill your darlings. No matter how much you like something that you've written, if it doesn't serve the story well, then it's got to go. So, the kind of people who I see making it are people who are able to kind of look at their work as though their worst enemy wrote it, and work on it in a way that they're completely objective about their own output, their own writing, and that makes it easier to kind of fix, because the publishing world, whether it's agents or editors or readers, are all going to just be merciless with you. So you might as well be merciless with yourself right off the bat, and get your book as in good a shape as you possibly can.
That makes a lot of sense, since there's probably like a lot more people who want to have their books published, and there are available agents and available spots and stuff. But anyways,
there really are. For me, finding an agent was the toughest part of the entire process. It was just like a soul-crushing thing. And part of that was because, I mean, like you say, like so many people believe that they're ready to publish, or that their book is ready to be published, that they're destined to be an author, and the challenge is differentiating yourself from those people. And part of that comes with putting in the work and taking writing as a kind of professional obligation, or approaching it like a professional, and then just kind of really like persevering again when you send stuff to agents and you get rejection letters instantly, and it's just you wonder why you're doing it, but you just have to continue to believe in yourself, and ultimately just about every writer whose book you'll find on the shelf is someone who's dealt with a ton of rejection and has been able to overcome that, and continue to bet on themselves and push forward.
Here's a fun question. What is one book that everyone should read at least once in their lifetime, and why? And how has this book changed who you are as a writer?
I've read so many, as I'm sure most authors and book people do, you read so many books and then someone asks you what to read, and you get kind of put on the spot. But for me, the book that I always recommend to people is a book called The Gentleman in Moscow, or A Gentleman in Moscow, by a guy named Amor Towles, who's like this, he's a Brooklyn lawyer who writes these just beautiful books. And A Gentleman in Moscow is the second book, and it's just so beautifully, wonderfully, inventively written. It's for me, I write thrillers and crime fiction, and I would say that my writing is kind of more of a blunt instrument, like it's more of a hammer. And there's, it functions to get the plot told, where I've always really admired authors who are able to just be kind of artistic with language and write kind of beautiful prose. And A Gentleman in Moscow is one that's just full of gems. It's very, very just like fun to read. It's heartwarming. It's like nothing else out there. It reminds me of the first time that I read a book called The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon, it came out about 20 years ago, but it's about these two guys who start a comic book company in New York. And I'm not into comics, but again, this book was just written so inventively and so beautifully, and the story is told so marvelously that it's just it's so captivating. So those are the two books. I mean, there's plenty more that I would recommend, but A Gentleman in Moscow is the one that when I get this question, that's the one that I go to.
Okay. And in your journey as an author, what are like some really important lessons that you learned? And if you could redo your journey all over again, is there anything you would change and why?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I've been kind of at a crossroads in my career this year, so it's something that I've been thinking about what I would change and why. And I would say that the kind of the main thing that I would tell myself as a young author is that you really can only rely on yourself in the business, and it it's important to surround yourself with good, trustworthy people, whether it's agents or editors or friends or first readers. Um, but you really have to stand up and advocate for yourself. You can't take for granted that other people are going to, uh, are going to do things to make your book a success. I when I started out, my first book deal, I was very lucky. I landed with a major publisher, with an editor who had been editing household name editors for years, and I was kind of groomed to be one of these household name authors. And I remember sitting in a meeting in New York with the entire publishing house and the kind of publicity people telling me, "Oh, don't worry, we'll handle the publicity. You just write the books." And I thought, okay, well, that's convenient. And so I kind of went off and did that. And it worked for a while. But, as my career went on, the effort that other people were willing to put in to publicize my stuff was diminished. And I, I kind of should have been more active in filling the void as far as, taking control of my own marketing and publicity and stuff. It's a part of writing that no author really likes. Like, none of us want to be on social media, like, kind of trying to begging people to buy our books or, all of that. So it's not a fun part of the process, but it is, I think it's important. And I think, kind of surrounding yourself with people who have your best interests at heart, and then not being afraid to make changes, when things aren't working for you. This year I ended my relationship with my agent, who had been representing me for 12 years and 12 years and 12 books, and was a friend and someone who had, we kind of grown in the business together. But we'd grown apart. And truth be told, I probably should have, parted ways with her some time before, because, things just weren't working. But I didn't want to end a kind of friendship and a relationship. But in hindsight, your name as an author is the only name that's on the cover of the book, and it's your sales record that is going to determine what happens to you moving forward. So, I would definitely tell myself to be a bit more kind of proactive as far as my own career, and then also not be afraid to make changes and ask questions and stand up for myself when I really needed to.
In general, what are your biggest concerns about the job market in the future?
That's an interesting question too. I mean, the job market for authors is such a constantly changing thing. Like, when I got into publishing about 10 or 11 years ago, the way that kind of authors were being developed with publishers was a bit different than now, and what publishers were looking for was different. I got in at a time when publishers in my genre, mystery and thrillers, they were all trying to start series of books. So you'd write a book every year and grow your audience and hopefully kind of just maintain kind of momentum and a snowball effect. And that has changed with kind of the onset of streaming services like Netflix, like Hulu, HBO Max. A lot of kind of publishers are looking for this, the one story that they can sell to Netflix that will stand on its own And the kind of idea of building a series and devoting the resources to an author for 5 or 6 books is just not really there anymore. So and the other thing is that a lot of authors who have written series, like famous series, like Tom Clancy would be an example. Robert Ludlum, who wrote The Bourne Identity, like those authors have passed away, but their books are still being written by other authors who just aren't getting the credit. So it's difficult to kind of break in as an author in a way that it might have been before. As far as the job market in general, it's hard to say. Like right now, it seems as though like people are hiring everywhere. From what I can tell, I haven't really kind of entered the job market in a while. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I guess it depends on where you see kind of the world going from here, and I think probably long term, we're all going to be faced with some questions, whether it's like jobs or sea level rising or kind of like there's a ton of kind of things in the far future that will probably make all of this stuff about writing books about cops and robbers kind of a moot point. But yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that I'll say about the job market is that the job market in publishing, people who are not writers but editors and publicity people and stuff, I think there'll be a reckoning there. Like right now, as we're speaking, HarperCollins in New York, a bunch of their employees are on strike for better wages. People in Manhattan, in downtown New York, are in publishing are earning like $40,000 a year, which is not a living wage. Like in Manhattan, that's an insane. Apartments are like $3,000 or $4,000 at for the really bad ones. So publishing kind of functions on these people who are getting paid significantly below a living wage to keep the books coming out. And I think and hope that there'll be a reckoning where behind the scenes people will be paid more commensurate with their value. So hopefully those jobs will be rewarded more.
Yeah, makes sense, because like there's a lot of I read the acknowledgement sections of each book, and there's like a bunch of names, so I know that it takes a lot of work just to make a book. And
it really does. Like there are people who, I mean, just put their hearts and souls into these books, whether it's publicity people or sales people or marketing people or book designers or like copy editors. For me, a copy editor, the first time I had a book copy edited, I thought, my goodness, like why aren't these people household names? They save you from so many just like mistakes that'll make you look so dumb, and they're not, they don't get any credit and they don't get paid very well. So it's really kind of a travesty, and I really hope that this job action by the HarperCollins union will lead to kind of changes across the board.
What tips would you give to young people who have trouble finding a job or deciding what major they want to pursue?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I went to university, there were so many people who, especially in first year, who had just gone to first year because it was the next logical step, or because their families expected them to get a degree, and so they just picked a degree and went to it, and then they were unhappy, and sometimes they flunked out. Like my roommate in first year. He was in like a biochemistry program and he hated it, and it was not for him. He was a creative guy, and after like a couple of years he dropped out, and then he went to culinary school, and now he's a private chef on luxury yachts. Like he travels around the world cooking for rich people on yachts. Like I think I grew up with doctors as parents, but I think I think there's value in learning a trade. I think there's value, I don't think that I don't think that we need to kind of look down on people who become plumbers and electricians and stuff. Like, I think a lot of people I know who went that route are living more comfortably than those of us who went and got arts degrees at university or a science degree and couldn't do anything with it. I think my advice to young people would be, give yourself time to explore and figure out what it is you want to do, and give yourself, have as many experiences as you possibly can before you decide what road you're going to take. And I also say that I think in your 20s, there's a lot of pressure to choose a path that you believe is going to take you essentially to the rest of your life. And I don't think it doesn't have to be that way. Like, decisions you make in your 20s and in your late teens will determine the course of your life, but it's not, they're not irreversible. So, if you can take a year off before university and work a job somewhere, like have an adventure and work just kind of a menial job in some place that you wouldn't normally go. If there's something that you really want to do, pursue it. I think just, be aware of the possibilities and keep an open mind and don't just think that you have to do something because society tells you have to do it. Like, there's other paths that you can take. And oftentimes they'll be more rewarding, and oftentimes you'll find yourself on those paths anyway after, trying the path that other people wanted you to take. So.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense because, constantly, as time progresses on now, especially now, there's a lot of pressure for young people to just figure out what they want to do early, and sort of one of the reasons why I'm doing these interviews is just I have a lot of interest, and I'm like, oh no, what do I do? And yeah, there's a lot of pressure from society. And
for sure. I was the same way. And friends of mine were similar. Like, in your teens and 20s, you're thinking like, oh my God, I have to determine right now what my life's going to look like. And it doesn't have to be that way. You obviously have to work to survive. You want to find a path, but you have time to determine the things that interest you. And you can look outside the box and I think I've always tried to live a life where I was having adventures and saying yes to as many things that interested me as I possibly could. And I feel like just having faith in yourself that your interests will propel you forward, as opposed to kind of trying to do something that other people want you to do, or even narrowing down your interests into the one thing. It doesn't have to be the one thing, especially these days.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think just it's always really cool for me as a writer to talk to people, younger people who are interested in what I do and interested in possibly following my career path. I think I've worked with and mentored kind of young students who were aspiring writers, and what's always kind of made me almost envious in a way is just the joy that they take from writing, and the joy that people take from writing, and just the creative process. People kind of just writing for the sake of telling stories, and that, I think, is the magic that you can sometimes lose sight of when it becomes your job. But just the kind of the storyteller's instinct and the joy in telling stories is something that I find so refreshing in people who are aspiring writers. And it's something that, to anyone who's kind of hoping to write, the most important thing is just holding on to that storyteller's instinct and that desire to tell stories, because it's magical.